Hi, Kirk Megu here, and I'm just going to announce my guest for tomorrow's Independent Thought and Freedom podcast is actually Christopher McIntosh, an author about Western esotericism and paganism. It may sound a little bit off from my topics, but I'm going to explain how he became a guest and why it's important. And it all starts with the conversation I had on John Tangney's podcast, Intellectual Diversity. And I was talking about nationalism, the alt-right, a Caribbean intellectual tradition, the New World Group, things that I was part of, and why I maintain my presence and roots in the West Indies, Trinidad and Tobago in particular, these sorts of things, but also engage with the global at the same time. And I engage with the global from my local position because, there's always that link there. Anyhow, John had told me that the author, Christopher McIntosh, really liked that podcast and he saw in me a sort of kindred spirit. And that was interesting because one might think, why? Well, he's speaking about European paganism, and then also things like Rosicrucianism and these sort of esoteric kind of cultish or lodge type fraternal organizations. Let me put it that way instead of cultish. But yeah, so I wasn't speaking about anything like that. That was not what I was talking about, and it's not really my main topic of interest, although I have to tell you I am very, very interested in all those things. Um, and and I'll tell you, but it does link up with the topic that I'm talking about, especially, I'm so interested right now in what's going on in the world in nationalism versus globalism. In fact, I'm going to be titling our conversation, which runs at almost about 2 hours. I'm going to title it Global Paganism versus Globalism. Right? You see, my interest in paganism in this aspect is as it has been manifested in Europe as a rejection of Christianity in favor of ancestral pre-Christian religions. So in Iceland, people going back to the Icelandic saga and the Norse gods. But we can go like way back to Julian the Apostate, who was, I believe he was a grandson of Constantine, who was the first Roman emperor that converted to Christianity and converted the Roman Empire to Christianity. And Julian the Apostate wanted to go back to the old gods. He thought it was wrong to leave the Roman gods and abandon their worship and the tradition. So it goes back to then, even the Italian Renaissance. A lot of people don't understand that the Renaissance, in terms of, the explosion of humanism and art and science and investigation and reading and literacy and writing and all these things, perspective, 3D, looking at from a human perspective, that it comes from a reevaluation of the Greco-Roman pagan traditions, moving away from the Catholic Church in particular and rediscovering the wisdom of the pagans, the Greeks and the Romans. It goes to the 19th century, the German Romantics, including Nietzsche. I would definitely put him there, and someone who I've spoken about quite a bit, and their rejection of the sort of universal, rational, homogenizing forces, of the Enlightenment that had just come about, the French Revolution and these sorts of things. And instead, they posited national identity, local identities, and nationalism in the 19th century and 20th century was very, very much influenced by these pagan movements. Getting back to your roots, getting back to your pre-Christian roots, because Christianity was seen in Europe as an alien imposition. For people in the West Indies, that is kind of weird because Christianity is seen as a European religion, but it's not. It was even imposed in Europe at a certain point in time, and a lot of these pagan thinkers and pagan movements are looking at the forced conversion to Christianity, 1,000 years ago, 1,500 years ago, etc. Well, around 1,000 years ago and a little bit before. And so that's interesting in the whole thing about paganism versus globalism, right? But what's more in Christopher McIntosh's story is that he used to work with the United Nations Development Program, and I that speaks to me because I've been involved with that whole development scene and economic development since the 80s, and I'm very, very familiar with it. And I too had my split with its universalistic tendency, this idea that development should look the same everywhere, almost like the idea of development is that everywhere should be like America, right? Instead of different countries may have different values and want different things. Maybe, in a way, development, this whole idea of economic development is kind of like, if you put it in this paradigm, it's like the new Christianity for the materialist age. I've raised that issue with him. It's like spreading the new universal global gospel of material abundance. We have some very, very interesting discussions. So join us tomorrow. It's going to be great, and I look forward to seeing you there. Take care. Bye.